Understanding where someone came from and what they converted on is absolutely critical in your lead management process to better understand first touch, last touch, and tipping point methodologies of attribution. That tipping point is really telling us what did somebody do right before they became sales ready, or maybe a traditional MQL. We want to be able to capture that data on your leads and contacts within your CRM, as well as the contact in your marketing automation platform, to better understand what's working and not working from a single touch methodology. And what we're going to be talking about today is how to set that data up in HubSpot to make sure that it works smoothly throughout your process. Now, if this is the first time that you are getting engaged with our content, we spent the last couple of videos talking about, from a strategic workshop, how to think about your lead source data. And then we also spoke about how to set up your UTM automation on your website to make sure that that data passes through effectively when you do form fills on your website. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that yet, that's okay. Pause this video and maybe take a look at those previous videos that we walk through both of those things, because it's really essential to understand why we're even talking about this in the first place. But if you are interested in understanding how to go about setting it up in your HubSpot instance, let's get started. In episode 2 of this series, we walk through how to build the lead management process controller that calls out to all of the other processes that need to run for an effective data management solution. What we're going to be talking about today is the first piece of this lead management process, and that is your lead sourcing controller. And so if we go back to the lead management process that we can see in HubSpot, we will see that we have the lead management status gets updated to lead management started. And then the first thing that we do is we call this workflow HubSpot source to UTMs. Before I dive into this, the reason why we have this in place is sometimes the UTMs don't pass through. Either people are blocking cookies, maybe they're blocking scripts from running on the website. So the UTMs that you are capturing on your website to pass through on the form fill may not get captured. And so what we've done is we've leveraged HubSpot's behavior for latest source information, and we'll take that information and populate UTMs appropriately. So that's the first thing that we're going to talk about today. Let's click into this workflow. So the first step of each of these workflows that we create is we want to update our lead management status field to a new value. This is especially helpful when you're troubleshooting issues or auditing your workflows, is that every step of the process, we are going to indicate when it started and when it ended. So we can see, did anything get hung up in automation? So that's the first step that we do here, set the lead management status to lead sourcing started. And then we're going to take a look at our branch. The thing that we want to look at is, do we have UTMs present? If not, did we have a recent conversion? And so you can see here our logic for this branch. It's an if-then branch that we have created here. We are checking UTM medium, content, campaign, source, and term. If they are all unknown, then we are going to check, did you have a recent conversion date? If that is within the last 1 day, then we can proceed this person through our automation here. That recent conversion date being less than 1 day ago, what this is it's an out-of-the-box field with HubSpot, and this gets populated anytime somebody fills out a form. So this solution is really trying to solve for a digital experience when somebody has filled out a form, and maybe we didn't capture the UTM values. So let's say that these are blank, and then they come through. We will take a look at our UTM fields. So there's 2 approaches that we can take within HubSpot, and this is all based on the workshop that I had previously walked through. And so we're taking the UTM values. So these UTM values may be different for your organization, just depending on how your team are setting up UTM. So just be mindful of that this cannot be a simple copy and paste. But there's 2 approaches that we can take for normalizing this data. The first one is the easiest. Latest source is a field that HubSpot is automatically populating just based upon its tracking tokens that are on the website. If that is normalized to organic social when they come through this process and you don't have UTMs, then what we can do is take them down the path of organic social. Sometimes HubSpot isn't going to just be able to capture that it's organic social. Maybe you're utilizing UTM values that don't necessarily align to what HubSpot is trying to capture. If that is the case, then what we are going to do is we are going to look at the latest source of other campaigns. This is kind of the default when it can't find any of the sources that would come through UTMs that it is listening for. And then in that case, what we are looking for is in latest source drill down to, we want it to show anything that contains social. The way that latest source drill down to property works when the latest source is other campaigns is that HubSpot will populate UTM source space / space UTM medium values in this field. And so that's what we're doing here. Latest source drill down to contains any of / space social. This field would be populated with whatever UTM value that you're setting if you are doing something that you are populating on an organic social basis. Let's take a moment to just look at how HubSpot kind of organizes all of this data. So there are a few considerations that you need to make when you are, first of all, defining your UTM values if you're a HubSpot client, because there's some things that you can do to just make this work a little bit easier. But as I had mentioned earlier, the other campaigns, what it will do is in original or latest source drill down to, it will populate source space / space medium. So that is what we were looking for here in our first branch, is looking for other campaigns and then that it contains social. How can I make sure that HubSpot is able to actually categorize these values a little bit better? There's a link that we will include in the description for how HubSpot categorizes traffic. And I would recommend starting here. So that way you make sure that you're setting things up in a way that is going to work with HubSpot's automation and it simplifies some of this process. But this is here to help support if there are very specific use cases or requirements that your team has around UTMs. So for example, with organic social, we can see that the UTM medium parameter is social. So that's the reason why our recommendation starts with set it as social, because then we probably wouldn't even need this other logic, but we will still include it as a just-in-case measure. Next is take a look at paid social. So our latest source is either going to be paid social, or we're looking at other campaigns where the drill down to contains / space paid social. What we can see here is that organic search works very similar. We're listening for that organic search, or if organic is in the UTM medium value. Paid search, we're doing the same thing, but here we're listening for PPC. And as we look over here, paid search, the source parameter contains the words AdWord PPC or CPC. So you could go with any of these options and get the out of the box. Or if you really needed this to say like paid search, paid - search, and that's what you needed with some of your external partners that you might be working with, you can make it work with your HubSpot automation. So that is the kind of framework that we are establishing for all of our major branches. And so we have branches that are established for organic social, paid social, organic search, paid search, email marketing, referrals, and web traffic. If it can't find it for any of those, then we just break it down and put it through the rest of our lead sourcing automation. So when we get into the individual branches, so let's take a look at organic social as an example, we are going to see a couple of things. The first thing that we do is we set the property value of UTM_medium to social. And then we move it over into a different action and we have a different branch that we look at. Before we dive into that paid social, we're going to set the UTM medium to paid social. That's what we've defined in our workshop. And as a result, we're going to set it to that value. So these are going to be dependent on your business and the UTMs that you want to set and establish for the future automation to listen for. With social, the way that it works is you are going to have a branch that is listening for latest source drill down to contain LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or X. And so what you're listening for here is the UTM source values. And this corresponds with the other traffic, the other campaigns where it's setting source and medium. If you have organic social or paid social, then what you will notice is that the drill down one field is going to populate what that social media site is. So if it doesn't match any of these where drill down 2 contains that value, our default is going to actually copy the latest source drill down 1 value into UTM source. And so here it's going to take Facebook, copy it down into UTM source. Maybe it takes a completely different one like Snapchat that we didn't define in our previous branches. Take Snapchat and then copy it right down into the UTM source value. And then all of these workflows will bring us into the last step of this process, which moves us to the workflow UTM medium to lead source. Before we dive into that one, let's just take a look at what the other logic is going to look like. The next thing is going to be organic search. Organic search, we're going to set the UTM medium to organic, and then we're going to go over to our search branch, which kind of works similar to what we had set up with social with some slight variations. Paid search is a little bit unique when it comes to this automation, and I will walk you through what that looks like in just 1 second. But if it normalizes into paid search, we're going to set the UTM value of paid search, all one word. Now, in our branch, we're going to take a look at Google. There are 3 different queries that we will include in each of these branches. Before we dive into the specifics, let's take a look at how search works. So you have organic search, and you have paid search, and then you have other campaigns. All 3 of these we are accounting for in this branching logic. Organic search is pretty simple. What it's going to do is it's going to populate the engine site in drill down 2. The paid search is a little bit unique. When it comes to paid search, HubSpot doesn't actually populate the search engine in either of these fields. Instead, what it does is it retrieves the campaign name from UTM campaign. And so because there is not an area where it is just capturing the search engine site, we make a recommendation that you actually update your UTM builder for UTM campaign to require the search engine in that data value. That may be a change for your paid team, and it may be a change for your external partners. So it's definitely something as an operations manager that we need to work with our stakeholders to figure out if this is going to be something that works for them. If not, you might have to have a default value when it comes to paid search in this scenario, if you're not actually getting it captured in UTM medium or UTM source. But this is sort of a fallback and an option. And then the last one is our other campaigns. And so other campaigns are going to populate source and medium in drill down 2. So we have drill down 2 for 2 of these, organic search and other campaigns, and then drill down 1 in your paid search. And that is what we are seeing here. Latest source drill down 1 contains any of Google. This is going to be for our paid search criteria. Latest source drill down 2 contains any of Google space hyphen. This is going to account it for our other campaigns part of the branch. Or latest source drill down 2 is equal to any of Google. That is going to account for it for the organic search part of the branch. We're going to do the same thing for Bing and the same thing for Yahoo, and then the same thing for any other platforms that you might want to capture. These are obviously going to capture some of the major ones, but you could break this out and have as many branches as you need to. Next up is email marketing. Much, much simpler. I would say the majority of people for UTM medium that I've worked with, they want to have email as the value, and that's definitely the value that HubSpot is listening for. Email marketing is listening for anything in UTM source, medium, campaign to contain the word email. If you keep it simple, it's probably going to just get identified there. And so what we do is we set UTM medium to email. And then here we're going to set the UTM source to HubSpot. Again, we're not getting any UTM values to know, is this coming from a sales engagement platform or maybe from like a different type of email tool. So here we can just assume that it's coming in from HubSpot. Referral traffic is going to come in as UTM medium is going to get updated to referral. And then the latest source drill down 1 will get populated into UTM source. So to give you an understanding of referral, the way that this works is that the referring website domain gets populated in drill down 1. So that's what we're doing. We're setting it to referral, and then we are setting the domain that they're coming from in UTM source. Last up here is web direct. We're going to set the medium to direct, and then the UTM source is going to be your website. Here in our demo environment, we have it set up to domain.com, but that's going to get updated with whatever website that you are coming from. And then you'll just notice that everything resolves to step 24, go to workflow, because what we want all of these steps to go through is to our next lead sourcing program, which is UTM medium getting normalized into lead source. So let's get started with that. UTM medium, we are now going to create branches for each of our sources that we want to capture. And so in the previous workflow, we were assuming that we didn't have UTMs, but if we have UTMs, they should also be coming through into this workflow. If we didn't have UTMs, we were trying to normalize that data utilizing data that we can capture from HubSpot. And so now we can keep it nice and simple. And all that we have to listen for is the UTM medium values that we defined in the workshop. So organic search, we're setting up as organic. We've got organic social being normalized, coming in from UTM medium that equals social. And you can see each of these are going to be set up. Pretty straightforward. You'll notice here that we also have offline activities. And so, for example, cold list upload is listening for UTM medium equals cold list upload. I love to use the term cold list upload. You could update this to a list upload, but think about this as data that you're getting from a data source. That might be like ZoomInfo, LeadIQ, Cognism, any of the different data vendors that your teams might be using to bring people in. We know that they're cold. We're using them to do our prospecting, maybe some account-based strategy. So we know that they're coming into the database and we want to define those accordingly. Event is another big one. And so what we're going to always recommend is that when you're deploying something like this, that you're actually adding UTM medium and UTM source values to your list upload templates. So that way, when you're bringing that data in, we can attribute it to events, or we can attribute it to, different offline activities. Maybe that's content syndication that you're doing a list upload for. We want to make sure that we're accounting for all of those in this workflow. Word of mouth could come in. This is maybe a little bit more of a manual setup, to be honest. Like, nobody's going to set a UTM medium value, but if you have a list of people that you're getting from some sort of like offline engagement that's not really an event, but maybe it's a partner that wants to share it with you, you can set word of mouth as your lead source on these. Sales outbound is a little unique. We bring this down toward the end of our list, so that way if we have UTM values associated, we can. What sales outbound is really attributing to is people that get created in Salesforce and then get synced over into your HubSpot instance, and they get created by the sales team. So here we're listening for either UTM medium to get set to outbound, or we can set it up where we're listening to the latest source information of offline sources coming in from Salesforce, and they were created in the last one day. That can kind of bucket us into a sales outbound motion. And then the other two that we always want to create are other. So if we don't know the UTM, if we know the UTM medium value, but they don't match any of our branches, maybe it's a new source that we didn't account for, maybe it's a typo. We want to make sure that we're at least capturing that information. And so we're going to create an other branch. And then the last one is an unknown branch. And this is going to be where everything else falls into. So pretty straightforward. As soon as we get into like our organic search branch, we are going to set the property value of lead source latest to organic search. And then the last step here is that we're going to go to the next action. And that is to see, is my lead source field populated? So you'll notice that we're setting lead source latest every single time, but lead source should only be updated once. And so the branch here that we're looking for is if lead source is populated, that means that the lead source is known. If it falls into the lead source is populated, then it will just proceed to the next workflow that we have set up, which is talking about UTM source data. If lead source is empty, we will copy the latest lead source value into the lead source field. And then we just bring it back up and move into that next workflow. So that is sort of where all of these things are normalizing into. You'll notice it's pretty straightforward. Every branch that you have, you're going to be setting your lead source latest value to the value that it should normalize into. And then where we get to the last two, so we have sales outbound, it gets normalized into sales outbound, not a problem. Other, so this is where UTM medium is known, but it doesn't fall into these other branches. What we will do here is just copy the UTM value into lead source latest. And then if it's not known, we still want there to be a value, right? At the end of the day, if you're auditing your lead source data, you don't want people being created and not getting these data values populated. And so we have latest lead source fields getting updated with not provided. That's the example that we have here, but you could set this to whatever you want it to be in your organization as long as it is consistent. Again, everything goes over into this branch to see if lead source needs to be populated. And then we go to the next workflow, which is now setting UTM source. So that is what we are going to move into next. UTM source data works very similar to UTM medium. So here we are going to have a branch and we are listening for UTM source data. And so we can normalize trade show based upon trade show, field event, etc., etc. And you guessed it, down near the bottom, we have some slight exceptions to that overall process. For the most part, you're just taking UTM source and you're normalizing it into all of the different sources that you would want to normalize. When it comes to sales outbound, I find that it's easiest to just look at the lead source latest field. That's what you updated in the previous workflow. If it says sales outbound, we know that then it is a sales outbound motion and we can set the lead source detail field to what we need it to be. And then again, we're listening for if UTM source is known, it will go into the other branch. And then if it's unknown, it will go into the unknown branch. Very similar process here. Let's say that we have trade show. We're going to set the property value of lead source detail latest to trade show. We're always updating the latest fields. And so we're doing this for field events and hosted webinars and partner webinars and sponsored webinars. Again, all of these things you're wanting to capture in that lead source workshop. So that way you can make sure that you have good, clean data that you can report on for all of the details of your previous lead sources. These are all normalizing now into a different branch. And this branch is listening for if lead source detail is populated. If lead source detail is populated, then it just moves into the next workflow, which is our lead source program normalization. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Of course, if lead source is empty, then we just copy the lead source detail latest value into the lead source detail field. And then we go into that workflow. Taking a look here near the end for some of our exceptions that we've talked about. Again, if sales outbound is populated here, we just set lead source detail latest to sales outbound again. There's no way that we can capture all of the sources up front. So kind of think about this of what are the most important sources that I always want to make sure are getting normalized and capitalized and looking accurate. But maybe what we want to do is account for those sources that fall outside of this. For example, referral traffic. It's just going to be the web domain that the referral traffic came from if it falls into that category. Or it might be coming in from a bunch of vendors that we just don't have accounted for. Or maybe there's a new channel that we haven't accounted for. At that point, we will want to make sure that we are able to copy UTM source into the lead source detail latest field. And then again, we want all of these fields to be populated no matter what. So if we don't have UTMs, but they came through the order of ops process for lead sourcing, we will populate here not provided. And then all of these normalize into the same branch that we just talked about. I believe that this is the final step, so stick with me. This one's pretty straightforward. What we're going to want to do is normalize the lead source program field. Lead source program latest is set at every local program. So if you think about it, if you have actually, let me show you really quick. So what we're looking at here is the template for a web request filled out form. Every single one of our local programs is going to be set up in a similar way. What you can see here is because this is a web request and somebody filled out a form, we will include an autoresponder. That's not what's important for this. What we are looking at here is the lead source program latest field. The latest field, we are going to update this to be the name of the program. Most of the time, we are going to recommend that this matches a Salesforce campaign name, so that way you have a direct connection to whatever Salesforce campaign that it is associated with. If you're not utilizing Salesforce campaigns, you could set it up with some sort of naming schema that works for your organization. We want to set this data value before we call the lead management process because, as we had looked at earlier, we are using that field in our lead source program or lead source campaign automation. So let's go back to that. This automation is listening for the lead source program field to be populated. If the lead source program field is known, it will set a data value for lead management status to equal lead sourcing complete. However, if that field is blank, what we are going to do is we are going to copy the lead source program latest value into the lead source program field. And then we will move over to setting the lead management status to lead sourcing complete, which is the final step of our lead sourcing setup inside of HubSpot. This was a lot of information, and I'm really grateful that you stuck it out if you are still listening to this here. Feel free to utilize this recording, taking a look at all of the examples that we shared, making sure that you've set it up exactly as we had in this, or, of course, utilizing the specific UTM parameters that you were using in your organization. This is the first step of the lead management process that we're working through. And so our next video that we're going to be looking at is going to have to do with data enrichment and data normalization, and some really powerful ways that you can set up your marketing automation system, or HubSpot in this instance, to ensure that all of your key and critical fields are being normalized so that way they can be used in downstream automation. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Like and subscribe, and have a great day.